And he told me this amazing story of an ancient manuscript that had been lost for thousands and thousands of years, a pre-Diluvian manuscript that had then become published in the 18th century as a Victorian novel, published under the guise of fiction. But the rumours were it was actually real. It had been discovered by these group of archaeologists in Lebanon, in sort of the Holy Land area, during a dig sanctioned by the British Museum, paid for by the British Museum.
Hello and welcome to the Thriller Pitch Podcast, the director's cut of the thriller book world. Today I'm joined by Luke Richardson, author of the archaeological thriller, The Ark Files. Luke, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, well, Mark, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you for inviting me.
I am very excited today to talk about your archaeological thriller. I'm putting it up on the screen for our audience. Yeah, The Ark Files. I'm really excited to talk about this, especially how facts and fiction are intertwined. But before we get into that, let's hear the pitch for the book.
Absolutely. So the Ark Files is the first in my Eden Black archaeological thriller series. And Eden Black is someone who goes around finding artifacts and returning them to their rightful place. She's the person that undoes the wrongs of these wealthy people, or these people that steal things or take things that they shouldn't have and keep them to themselves. And she puts them back for the benefit of humanity. Now, the Ark Files, the story of the Ark Files follows her when people start dying, right? And all these people start dying when they were present on a dig 20 years ago, until she is the only one left. The difference was she was only 10 at the time of the dig, and the people who are going around offing people about the location of this secret archaeological site don't realize she was there and don't realize that she remembers where this place is. So the story goes on that she has to retrace her steps back to her childhood to solve these murders and stop the people that are trying to cover up the truth of the thing that lies inside that tomb in Lebanon. In fact, it is based, the Ark Files. But the series goes on. It's all about that. There are 7 books now. The Sahara event is the most up-to-date one, the recent one that's just behind my shoulder there. And they're all about ancient artifacts, lost civilizations, secret societies, curses, all of those sorts of things that I absolutely love talking about, writing about, and researching as well, which I know we're going to talk about in our conversation today.
Yeah, that's so much fun. I love that.
It is fun. It is fun.
So let's talk about where the idea, what came first, what you knew of the history of this particular book and the tombs, or Eden as a character, in that I want to put this girl through these things?
It's a bit of both, really. It's a bit of both. I've always loved this sort of story. I've always loved adventure books. I've always loved travel myself and going to see these places. I'm not really an adventurer in the terms of, I don't do long treks single-handedly across deserts or glaciers or mountains, but I've always loved being in different situations and exploring different cultures and stuff. And that definitely comes through in my writing. The previous series I wrote is about a group of international detectives that go and find missing people who go missing all over the world. So it sort of leans into that. And then this one, this book came to me in quite an interesting way, actually. Have you read the author's note of this, Mark? Did you read
yeah.
I know you read the book.
Yeah,
so
I did.
You know where this goes in. And this isn't a spoiler. This bit isn't a spoiler. It was funny because a friend of mine phoned me up years ago and he said, You're writing a book, aren't you? And I was like, yeah, I am. Yeah. I'd written a couple at the time. And he said, I've got a story and I think you'll like it. And often, as a writer, when people say that, you tend to sort of roll your eyes and go, what you don't realize is coming up with the story is actually the easy bit, right? Yeah. It's the sitting down and writing the words, the perspiration at the keyboard that is the challenge, making it all stack together. But he said, just hear me out. And he told me this amazing story of an ancient manuscript that had been lost for thousands and thousands of years, a pre-Diluvian manuscript that had then become published in the 18th century as a Victorian novel, published under the guise of fiction. But the rumours were it was actually real. It had been discovered by these group of archaeologists in Lebanon, in sort of the Holy Land area, during a dig sanctioned by the British Museum, paid for by the British Museum. And the story goes that these guys found these clay tablets, these cuneiform tablets, and one of the guys there could read the tablets, and he quickly realized that what they were dealing with was so explosive, because it completely rewrote history of about pre-Diluvian societies, that they decided they couldn't give this to the museum, because at the time that was a very sort of religious, traditional organization, and they knew it would just get lost in the bureaucracy of that thing. So one of the guys faked his own death, got the tablets out of the place, fled to America, in fact, and translated it, then handed it on to another person who he knew, who was a writer, who published it as a work of fiction. And all of these things, there's a lot of things that stack together, a lot of evidence that stacks together, that I was like, this is an amazing story. So he said, write it, off you go. And I did my own research and pulled out some other bits myself and whatever. And that just gave me the sort of seed of the idea. And then I created Eden and her sort of relationships with her father and with the other people that she meets throughout the adventures, and changed quite a lot of the places. Well, changed the places in the sense where she comes from, and where the scenes that aren't specifically to do with that tomb are located. So yes, there is some evidence to suggest that the story behind the Ark Files is true, although I do hasten to add that it is a work of fiction.
You must be a bit of an outliner then, or do you consider yourself an outliner or a pantser as far as the process? No,
discovery writer, make it up as I go along. Yeah, discover the story. I'm the story's first reader. So,
so how do you balance the coming up with the story with, like, if you're discovery writing the story, but then you have all the research that you're trying to put in, especially with this particular book, because this is all based on things that actually happen. So you almost, like, how do you do that?
It is based on things that actually happened, but in a way it's not, because what's in the story that's in the tablets is not really in the book. It's all about the discovery of the tablets and what would happen if the tablets should be discovered. Now, I list the name of the novel. It's called The Diary of a Loma in the author's notes, which tells you, if you want to go and read that book that was published in 1830 or whatever it was, I think a bit later than that, 1880, something like that, you can go and buy it on Amazon or wherever. But because I'm not actually focused on that, I'm focused on things in the present day, I can take a bit more sort of poetic license with how things work.
Do you ever get concerned that something like you said or did in your book was, like, wrong historically, and people come back and say, like, why did you misrepresent this?
People do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
People do come back and say things like that. And it's fiction, right? Yeah. I'm making a work of fiction with the intention to entertain people, with the intention of taking them away from their surroundings and immersing them in a world of fun and adventure and all of these things. So actually, I think that if the history isn't spot on, that's okay.
Yeah. I like that. I think that's the same with, well, a lot of different thrillers, because I think if we wrote books that were realistic, they would be very boring, because most of our lives are quite boring. Like with FBI agents or whatever, if we wrote what an FBI agent would actually do in this specific situation, it would not be any of the things that are interesting that happen in fiction that happen in real life.
Yeah, that's it. If you think about archaeology, right, which I call them archaeological thrillers, but they're not there sort of excavating a skeleton with a paintbrush for hours and hours and hours. That's not what these books are about. And the people who are frustrated on the history, I feel like that's what they're sort of expecting, and that's cool, and that's great, and that's perhaps my failure for calling them that. But I think that's a different sort of style, isn't it? This is an action adventure thriller in which they're running away from bad guys. There are archaeological sort of artifacts involved, but there's more action than sort of piecing together the history in the way that an archaeologist might.
Yeah. I always think of like Indiana. When I hear archaeological thriller, I think of like Indiana Jones, where he was
Exactly.
like, it was a fun action. You could call it
Yeah.
archaeological, but yeah, we hope to understand the difference.
And I sort of think that something like Indiana Jones, and I wonder, I don't know, have any evidence to back this up, but I wonder how many actual archaeologists or historians saw that as a child and were like, I want to be that. I'm interested by that.
Yeah.
And that was like their understanding of what exploring history was like. And of course, it's really different to the life that they no doubt went on and led, but it just sort of, it's intriguing, isn't it? It's sort of, you know, it sort of could awaken interest in you, I suppose.
What kind of challenge did this story kind of present for you as a writer?
That's a good question. I think it was challenging because a lot of it takes place in Lebanon, which is a place that I was not able to visit in order to write this book. Going forwards, I have been able to choose stories that either have fitted into places that I've been to before and have enjoyed visiting, or those that I've been to since, or places I can go to and research the books specifically. But I wasn't able to go to Lebanon at this time. In fact, I wrote it 2021, 2022. So the events of around that period of time that stopped us easily traveling. And then still to this day, unfortunately, that part of the world isn't a particularly easy place to travel to. One day I would love to go. But that to me presented a challenge because I'm the sort of person that loves to go and explore a place on the ground, speak to the people, hear the sounds, eat the food, especially eat the food, explore the culture and understand at that grassroots level the place that I'm writing about.
Oh, that's so cool. I wish I could travel to all the places that I write about. You mentioned you're a discovery writer, but when you're traveling to these places, presumably before you start writing the book, or maybe after, I guess you could explain that. Is it like, are you traveling? You're like, oh, I could do that here, and then you see this, and you're like, oh, that would be a great place. Like, especially with Eden now, is it like, oh, Eden would do this, and she would do that, and then you're just kind of like, almost the story comes to life, pretty much like a movie, right? As you would like be exploring this, taking pictures and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely that. And sometimes it works in two ways. Sometimes I know the story or I know a bit of the story. Like at the moment, I'm working on the 8th book in the Eden series. It will be set in Paris, and we're going to Paris in a couple of weeks to just get boots on the ground and sort of work out some of the places I want to include. Now, I've already started writing the story, so and I sort of know what it's going to be about a bit, but there's enough wiggle room, enough. I'm not even halfway yet, so there's a lot of space to still sort of work things around when we're there and we discover things that we like. On the other hand, there are stories that just emerge, and I'm traveling in a place that I have no intention of setting a story, but they just appear. For example, with the Lotus Key, which was the last book, we went to Morocco, to Marrakesh last January, and we were in a madrasa there, which is an Islamic university. And I was looking at the tile work, and they've got these fantastic tile. You will have seen it, the sort of Arabic tile pattern. It almost looks like a kaleidoscope, the way that it's designed. And it's called quasi-crystalline tiling or something. I think I may have said that wrong, but it's something like that. Anyway, I was researching this afterwards because I love to go down these sort of research rabbit holes of the places I've seen. And this quasi-crystalline tiling is a specific pattern that never repeats. It can be filled with as much space as it possibly can, but it never quite repeats in terms of the colours and the shape that was used. This particular madrasa was from like the 14th century. It's about 700 years old. The mainstream scientists only discovered this pattern. They only realised this pattern actually existed in the 1970s. It was discovered by a guy called Penrose, a British guy who won a Nobel Prize for it, who won a Nobel Prize for this discovery. And I love the idea that there's this thing that mainstream science is discovering recently, and yet it's been on the wall of a madrasa for 700 years, and no one has sort of connected the two.
Yeah.
Even more interestingly, it's a molecular structure that is only found in intense heat. So it was never found on planet Earth before the nuclear era, so before the 1950s, it never existed on planet Earth, or in meteors that have come, that have crashed down to the Earth and come from outer space. So
Ooh.
even more to that, this idea, I know it gets you a bit sort of creepy.
Yeah.
This idea that and this is where the fiction part comes in, right? The idea that these mathematicians in the 1400s realized and knew about this nuclear molecular structure that wasn't discovered until the late 20th century, and this all of these things, I'm just like, that's so cool. That has to be in a book. And that inspired the Lotus Key, which was the one that came out towards the end of last year.
Oh, I love how passionate you are when you talk about this. Is this just like a hobby, or is this like what you do full time, is the research and the book writing?
This has become the job. This has become the full-time thing, which is wonderful and a privilege and an honor. And I love that. But there's also like the thing the hobby becoming the job has its problems as well, when when you're still plotting stories at 11 o'clock at night and then getting up first thing and doing it again.
Yeah.
So it's a real honor and I love it, but it has become the job too.
So when people put this book down, when they finish, let's talk about the Ark Files specifically, when they finish this book and put it down at the end, what are you hoping that they're going to feel, or that they're taking away from this story?
There's a few things here. On the surface level, this is an adventure story that I want to be a real escapist, a real bit of escapism for anyone who wants to pick it up. I've had great feedback from this, really meaningful feedback, about people who've been waiting in the doctor's office for relatives or whatever they're doing, getting through difficult times, and the books have brought them some solace. And I think as a writer, that's always a really wonderful thing to be able to do that, right? On the second level, I love the idea that my books allow people to travel in the way I enjoy quite so much. Some of my favorite memories have been when I've been completely out of my depth in Egypt or India or wherever I've been, and I'm just wandering through this market, seeing things that I've never seen before, or on a taxi ride through some area of where, and those things that just take you out of your comfort zone and show you something completely new and are very, very exciting and inspiring to me. And I hope the book, or my books in general, can provide that and give people that sort of childlike wonder that we've all experienced. We've all experienced before, and it's a real honor to experience again, isn't it, when you get into your adulthood as well?
Yes, it is. How do you balance? So when you're writing this, then how do you balance for yourself, if you're thinking about, as you're writing, the bringing the place to life, so setting place with the description, and the action and some of the fights and things that are going on, and building character moments?
Mm-hmm. Good question. I always say that the story has to be the main thing. And whenever people ask me things like this, I talk about the story being like the engine of the book, right? The setting is wonderful, and I'm absolutely for the setting. I love that. That's a really important thing to me, and I work hard for that. But I feel like if you forget the story, if you ignore the story, you do that at your peril, right? You can't just say, or you can, but you shouldn't just say, I'm just going to pause the story for a minute to tell you about this really exciting place that the characters are in.
Yeah.
You have to combine the two. And when I wrote my first book, I didn't quite get this, and I went back and rewrote it years later. And for an example, I'd written a scene in a market in Kathmandu Killers, the book is called. I'd written this scene in the market, and in my first version, the character Leo was the character in that book. He's walking through the market and he's looking at all the things. So he looks at these piles of tomatoes that are stacked up in a pyramid shape, the market seller next to them, sort of counting out the money of the person who's buying them. Another person selling incense or selling meat or selling whatever. That was the first version. In the second version, I changed it so there's a chase scene through the market, and the bad guy slides through the pile of tomatoes, smashing them all over the place. Yeah. He gets sort of accosted by the market seller, who lobs one at him and chases after him as well. And then they're kicking over the incense stall guy's little stack of coals, and they go everywhere as well. And you're just finding a way not only to show the reader the scene, but to immerse both the reader and those characters in that scene and make that a part of the action as well.
Yeah. Having written as many books as you can, as you have you found that gets easier to do as you continue to write more books, as you develop as a writer? You notice these things almost in the first draft, so there's less work later on, or do you still kind of, second draft is a fixing of all the things that you played with in draft one?
Certainly, yes, it is. I tend, though, not to think about the stages of the writing process like you've described there. There's not really draft one, draft two, editing. To me now it just feels like writing. It's all sort of one thing, because in one few hours of work, as I'm sure you do the same, in one few hours of work you might write a few new words over here, then you'll skip back and edit a bit over here, then you'll go and expand or develop a scene over here, and you're just sort of, it's not always that constant forward motion. There's a bit of sort of back and forth as you work through the book, I think.
Oh, that's an interesting process. No, I actually don't do it that way. I am more linear as I describe it, which is probably why I asked the question that way. So for me, I won't even look back at what I had written for the entire book until I get to the end and finish that first draft. And then I'll go back, because I want to know, especially for me, I want to know who the characters are right up until the final moment. And then I know if I need them to be a little bit different or to make different decisions early on, that's when I go through. So that's really interesting that you jump all around. I don't know if my brain can handle that. I love it.
And also I'll come up with a scene as sort of as I've described in that, for example, that madrasa in Marrakesh. I'll know I want to do a scene there, but I won't know exactly where it fits in the story, but I'll see it sort of in my mind's eye. And I'm like, right, that's where I'm going to start writing, and I'll write that scene, and I like that. And then I'm like, right, what comes before that? What comes after that? Where does that sit in the story? And it just sort of spiders out in this way. I also tend to write the protagonist scenes first, and this is what I'm doing at the moment, and then come back and put the antagonist in when I've sort of worked out exactly what they need to do.
Yeah.
So it is a bit of a messy way to write, but it seems to work, and I think I have tried doing the plotting before, and I got about a quarter of the way in and made one little change, and then of course the rest of the plot has gone completely out of the window. It doesn't work in that way. It doesn't seem to work in that way for me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I admire you for being able to do that. That's very cool. So what happens after the draft that you do? You said it goes to, who's the first reader of like one of your finished books?
So I will probably read it through 3 or 4 times over the course of that writing process that I just call nebulously writing. Then it will go to my editor, who's been with me now for several years, and he will read that through and it's really a copy edit, but he's also looking. I've said to him, if anything doesn't make sense, if I haven't sort of expanded on something or whatever, do point me out on that as well. Then I'll take it back and do another pass myself along with those edits, and then it goes to a team of beta readers. So they will spy out any little mistakes or just sort of give me an idea of how the story flows at that point. And occasionally I make changes by them, but generally speaking, by the time it goes to the editor, I'm quite solid on how I want that story to look.
Did you get any feedback with the Ark Files here from beta readers or your editor where you had to change a scene?
Good question. Not that I can remember, although it has been a little while since I since I wrote that. That was 2022 it was published, and then but I wrote it the year before. So yeah, it's been a while, maybe four and a bit years. I'm not saying, and I'm certain you know this, when you read back through something after years, you're like, what is this? Who wrote this?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
There are certainly bits like that, but I'm really pleased with it. I love the way the story stacks together. It explores. Yeah, there's lots of things I'm really proud of in that story, so I'm leaving it alone now.
Okay, yeah. So when it comes to fight scenes, how do you process a fight scene on the page? There's a lot of like action and fights and chases in here. How do you process that, a fight scene on the page? Are you thinking about like the emotional context? And we talked about the environment because you kind of went into how you interact with the environment there. And do you think of it as like a play by play? And this is mostly for people who haven't read the book yet, I guess. I don't have any idea of how you structure this.
Sure. Now, I'm not really an expert fighter, so I may get things wrong in the fight scenes. But also, I try not to make them too serious. They're a little bit slapstick. They're a little bit funny. There's generally they're not very gory. None of my books are gory or violent in the sense that people really get hurt. Of course they do, but you know what I mean. It's violence in the same way like a James Bond film or the Indiana Jones films, as you've spoken about already, would happen. You know, someone will get shot and they'll go down, or they'll get hit on the head and they'll go down, and that's the end of that. There's not sort of the gratuitous violence that you might get in some other books. Although, of course, I want there to be menacing there as well. But yes, for me, I try and make the fight scenes quite entertaining. There's generally a couple of people at the same time, so that they've got a bit of sort of banter and a bit of conversation that's going on whilst this action is playing out. I also try to make it in an interesting place, so that sort of lifts it as well. On the roof of a train was one of them. A building site, I think, was in the Ark Files. They were fighting on a construction site. Okay. So yeah, just making these interesting, trying to lift it with some humor as well that the characters might have. They have that sort of relationship together. So allowing them to bounce off each other whilst they're doing this serious thing lifts the book. I think it makes it a bit less gruesome.
Yeah. And there are deaths early on in this book. How do you, I don't think this is a spoiler, how do you decide who deserves a point of view scene rather than just like Eden could have read on the news or saw in the news, or any one of these characters, you know, in the timeline that you established early on could have seen or heard, or, you know, rather than the actual point of view until the end? How do you decide like how many characters you're going to put on the page so that, for one, as a reader, when I jump into a book, I wonder, I mean, obviously it's called the Eden Black series or thriller, so I know Eden Black is. But then I start reading a book and I'm thinking, okay, is this another main character that's being introduced? Okay, no, they're dead. Or you know what I mean? Like who's sticking around in this book, you know, and trying to balance overwhelming readers with characters versus kind of like telling, I guess, a quick summary that this person died.
Yes, that's true. And I remember the scene that you're speaking about in the first part of this. I felt like I wanted to do that because I think it's something that I've seen in a lot of similar books, and I think it works really nicely because you, as you said as an example, seeing that on the news, there's no real drama there. This particular scene, this guy's running through the streets of Sarajevo in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and he thinks there's someone on his tail, and it's a great sort of medieval market town, and these big guys are after him. And also that's the introduction to the sort of heavies that will be on their case throughout the story as well. It's obviously that guy doesn't have a point of view after that first bit, but it sets up quite a few things within that scene. We know that it's going to be quite exotic in the places that it goes. Hopefully we know that there's going to be some action. It's going to be quite exciting. Yeah. And also we've got the threat, right? I think if you had a book like this where no one died, you're sort of not in the right genre. There has to be threat. There has to be real life and death threat in there. Otherwise there's no sort of do you know what I mean? It isn't the page turning thing that you're promising. Yeah. If it's just like, this guy, he was really embarrassed to be caught by the bad guys. Yeah. He's going to have some stern words with his employer afterwards, you know. Yeah. For me, maybe I'm being a little bit flippant about killing a poor a poor archaeologist in the opening pages, but there we are.
Yeah, no, hey, it works, so that's good. So I want to ask about one of the characters' names. You named one of the villains of this Croft. And the name Croft, of course, if you're Indiana Jones video gamer movies, Laura Croft. Was that like and this character has nothing to do with Laura Croft for
no,
readers.
It doesn't.
It's got not even remotely. But did you put that name in there just for fun as like have a Croft in there?
Do you know what? I can't even remember. But I think I probably did. I like to put little sort of homages to various other authors in there. I like to do that. I also named the ship, the Martha Ann, which is from Clive Cussler's Numa Files, is their boat. Okay. And so I was like taking these little things and and just so people in the genre are like, oh yeah, I know that. But yes, as you say, this guy is this absolute meat mountain, hulky sort of brute of a man who goes around bullying people throughout the book. So he's nothing like
yeah. Okay. So when you built Eden as a character, did you know you were going to do a series? And I mean, I've only read the Ark Files, so a lot has been published, and I don't want to give too much away about, or have you give it away. But all the things that she may go through as a character in her previous life, did you know that you were going to create this many books and that you would have to kind of build her character over time and reveal information about her history and stuff over time? Or did you just write this book and then realized after that this was a lot of fun, we're going to bring her back?
I think it's probably more the second one. Although, had I have thought it through in a little more detail, I probably should have considered that a little more. I certainly wanted it to be a series. I certainly loved the idea that it was, because I've always loved stories like that. I have always enjoyed the traveler aspect and the history aspect. So that worked for me. Yeah, I definitely wanted it to be a series for lots of reasons. But as you say, I didn't necessarily think about all of the reveals that I might have to have done. And speaking to other authors who've approached series writing very consciously, thinking about sort of character arcs over a 5 or 6 book span, I didn't do any of that, which perhaps was an error at the time. Although I think it certainly has that character arc that you'll see when you read the rest of the series, that you'll see that she has changed and developed over the course of the books.
How do you keep track of it?
Now that's a very good question, and I feel like I should do more of that. I'm only at 8 books. I'm working on book number 8, so I don't think it's I haven't done that many to make it sort of like 20 books or something like this. I also don't. She's not going to change too much, right? Is what I'm saying here. Okay. I'm thinking about the way that the James Bond films work, right? Mm-hmm. Now, whilst there is some change in the character of Bond, you almost love him for what he is, right? And in the same way, I don't want Eden to change too much. She's always going to be a bit of a sharp-witted outsider. She's always going to have this real strong moral compass. She's always going to like to put things right that she sees that are wrong in the world. And of course, different people will join and leave the group as she goes on. But I think if I keep those main things the main thing, actually, that's great. What I'm trying to say is I'm not going to come back and all of a sudden she's 10 years older or 20 years older or whatever. I'm going to. I like the idea that she lives in in this impossible sort of age where she never really ages in any way, or things don't change in the way that they do for us in the real world.
Yeah, it's like it reminds me of Jack Reacher with Lee Child series. He does the same thing. I mean, a lot of thrillers do with book series. It's like, how old is your character now? And that's the kind of the running joke. But I think of
that's right. Yeah.
Jack Reacher when it comes to that. He doesn't change. Like every book, you're just kind of getting that even though the plots are different and the situation he gets himself into is different, which is very exciting, him as a person is not like, he's not changing. They're just like these little slow reveals of things once in a while.
Yeah, that's true. And also you think about the length of time, and I do some thinking about this, the length of time that spans within the book. In one of mine, it's probably around a week from page 1 to the end. Obviously, there are the various flashbacks where we look back at things that happened a long time before, but I mean like within that main story. Probably similar with the Jack Reacher books, as you've mentioned. So we're not talking, if you're thinking about, you could have put all these books end to end, in terms of a timeline. Actually, not as much time has passed as perhaps you think as a reader, so maybe there's only a couple of years over the course of 6 or 7 books.
She finds a lot of trouble in a very short period of time.
Yeah, this is one thing I am conscious of. She needs a break once in a while.
Yeah,
as do I.
She's not settling down. Yeah.
Yeah.
How long does it take you to write a book roughly these days?
For the first 4 or 5, I did 2 a year. I've now slowed down to 1 a year because I just found that quite exhausting. They're quite long books. They're about 100,000 words, 300 and something pages, and they're intense. Because we're dealing with the history, we're dealing with the research of the place and all of the things that we've talked about. I feel like to do it right takes a bit of time. So yeah, I'm committing now to 1 a year going forwards, which gives a good time for the editing and the pre-production things and all of that other stuff as well, and to write some other books in other series, which I'm enjoying doing too.
So what else is out there for our listeners who may appreciate other series that you have going on? Sure.
Yeah. So my first series is called the International Detective Series. I'm trying to think if I've got them on the back shelf. Here's one of them, Istanbul. The first one's called Kathmandu Killers. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of that. That is a guy who gets drawn into finding missing people around the world. He's very much sort of an anti-hero and everyman. And he goes to Istanbul or Berlin or Kathmandu or Hong Kong to find someone who hasn't come back. Really love writing those books. I've done 6. Every so often I get an email saying, when's the next one coming out? But as yet, haven't committed to it. Maybe one day, never say never. I'm also writing a series with a guy called John Hopton, which is this one. Ooh. It's good we're on camera, actually, because you can see them all.
Yeah.
The Shadow of the Sunstone, that was book 1 in the series. It is set around a lady called Nora Sierra Bird, who is a character in the Eden Black series. And John and I were talking and we said, we should write something together. I've known him for quite some time. And I said, well, I've got this idea about this retired Air Force pilot who sort of gets embroiled in all sorts of missing artifacts and nefarious goings on in her Caribbean flight school. So yeah, so that's the first one. The second one, which is called The Curse of the Jade Idol, is out this year. So we're doing about 1 a year there. And I'm working on another series on my own.
Wow.
Yeah, that I've started writing the first book of, but have had to put down. But I'm not mentioning anything about that yet because it's something that's going to come out later in the year. So yeah, I'll talk to you about that next time.
Yeah. So when you say 1 book a year, do you just mean one Eden Black book a year? How many books are you actually writing in a year?
Probably maybe 2 or 3, but then the one with John Hopton is co-writing, so that takes some of the lift off my shoulders because I'm not writing every single word of it myself, like the Eden books.
Still a furious schedule, though. That's still a lot of, even 3 books a year is a lot, especially when you have as much information and research as you do packed into your books. It's not like you set it in a cabin in the woods, where someone's like, well, it makes for a faster write as far as like, well, there's only so much to explain, and then we just get the action going, and you're in the woods, and much easier
that's true.
than the stuff you write.
That's true, but I love that, and I wouldn't change that. This was always the dream was to travel and write and research while I was in the process. So for me, that's a key part. That is the process. That's the writing process itself too.
Oh, you are living the dream. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, feels like it. Yeah, it's a good one.
So I got a question from James Rosenberg. He was the last author on the last guest on the show. He's going to ask you a question. You'll get to ask your question for the next guest that comes on the
Nice
show.
idea.
So he asks, what is your favorite novel? This is that you have written, and why is it your favorite?
Oh, yeah. I have to say the first one, Kathmandu Killers. In fact, I have got a copy of the original first version from 2019. Here it is. It's changed the cover now. I've got a new cover, new title. It's been rewritten lots of different times. But I think there's something about the first book turns you from being a non-writer into a writer, doesn't it? You've soldiered on, you've labored on that first book. And I remember the moment this one, it wasn't exactly this one, but one of them arrived, that first copy that I'd never seen it before, and I rushed to the post box and ripped it open. I was, you know, and then opened the first page and saw a spelling mistake. Oh,
Oh no.
I made that up, but maybe.
Okay.
But yeah. So yeah, that for me, I think it continued because it set me on this journey, right? It set me on this process of writing books, and it was a long way from writing this book to it becoming a living. But I wouldn't have done it without this book and all of the people that helped me produce it and read it and gave me wonderful comments about it and inspired me to get on and write the next one and take the next step and all of those things.
Yeah, that's awesome. What is the timeline, if you don't mind sharing, between when you released this book, which would have been like when you started publishing, let's say, until you were able to do it on your own? I think it's remarkable, and there's so few authors that are actually able to do what you do right now, that you've accomplished this.
So this one came out spring 2019. I think it was April or May. So that would be 6 years. Wow. In a few weeks' time. Then I resigned. I was an English teacher in a high school, in a secondary school at that time. And I resigned in 2020. I left my job. I knew that I wanted to make this a real thing, right? I'd loved writing that first book, and I was working on the second one and so on. And I wanted to make this a real thing. And I knew that a job like teaching is so all-encompassing. It occupies your mind so fully that you just can't concentrate on anything else. You can't really have that opportunity to dive into anything else. So I left that and then did quite a lot of freelance work, writing and various other freelance jobs for about 3 years. I think it was 2023 that I started tapering that off in 2023, did my last, finally finished that 2024. So it's been about 18 months now, just the book income, which is really good and very grateful for that. But yeah, it took a while, right? There was a transition period from one to the other. It wasn't just sort of, I'm off, see ya.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's an important message. Thank you for sharing that, because I think there is the belief that, I got my book out there, now I'm ready to make my millions and take off like a rocket. And for most 99% of authors, that's not the way, but you stuck with it, you followed your dream, and here you are.
Yeah, that's it. That I needed to stick with it. For me, this was something I love doing, and I still do to this day. You know, I write for pleasure as much as because now people are waiting for the book, which is a wonderful place to be. And as I said, I'm very grateful of that. But and don't take it for granted at all. Of course, it's really important to think in that way, I think.
What would you say at this point was a key to your success?
In what sense? In like
from
the sense of
publishing
like
so book one? Yeah, from book one to like being able to be a full-time author. Was there anything along that journey where you thought, oh, this is the moment, or this worked and really helped push me to this full-time author journey?
Yeah. I think the main change came when the main thing that I realized, I did that first series. I wrote 6 books in that series. I loved them. They didn't sell as much as I wanted them to. And the reason for that now is really obvious to me, is that it's quite hard to explain exactly what they are. And you may have noticed that in the podcast during this conversation. I've said these books they're about a guy who goes to find missing people around the world, and you're like, huh? What books like who writes books like that? I'm like, yeah, but he's not like a hard man. He's like a everyman sort of your regular guy sort of character. Okay, but and the problem with those books is, whilst I love them, they're just if it's difficult to tell you about, it's difficult to sell.
Yeah.
This is the point. Whereas the Eden Black books, I can just say ancient curses, secret societies, lost civilizations, and you're like, I've got it. I've got it. I'm with you. I either like it or I don't like it. Fine. And you can tell in 5 seconds whether you like that book or you don't like that book. Yeah. Whereas, as I say, the other series, you'd need a bit more explanation. You'd have to read the blurb. We'd have to have a conversation. And I think just that idea that I drilled down into finding something, because I wanted it to be a job, and there's a distinction there between someone who writes the book of their heart because they really want to write that book, or someone who writes because they want it to be a business. You need to think, right, how am I going to sell this thing? How am I going to communicate what this thing is to someone? How am I going to market this to someone? And for that, you really need to think about that at the writing level before you even put pen to paper, not when you're sitting there thinking, I've written this book. How am I now going to sell it to someone? Yeah. Which, of course, is what I did first, and I think what most people go and do the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's great.
I hope that's useful and inspiring. That's sort of where what I'd like these things to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, it's inspiring for me to hear you talk about that, to hear about your successes. I'm on that same journey, not writing full time, but that's ultimately the goal, is to end up where you are too.
Oh, fantastic! Oh, I wish you good luck with it, man. I think it's a great thing. Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who just published their first or second book? So they have the experience. They're beyond just writing now because they've written, the book one's out there. They've written 2, let's say. They have that behind them. What's a good thing for them to know, in your opinion?
I think to be really conscious about what you hope from it. As I said a minute ago, there's a distinction between people writing the book of their heart and people writing to be a business, to make money from this. And that's really important to understand. You can't compare one to the other. It's like comparing, apples and oranges. If you say, you see this a lot in the communities, right? You'll see someone saying, I've just sold 1 million copies of my really popular genre. And someone goes, why can't I sell my memoir about growing up in small town, wherever? And you're like, they're really different books. This one has been designed to sell as a product to people in a market that has proven to be hungry for it. This is a book that you love and your family will love in the years to come, and all of those things. And it's amazing that you've done it, but the expectations should be completely different. I think that's really important to understand. So I would say, if you want it to be a business, then you go into your market research and you look at what the hot tropes are. You look at what the hot genres are. You look at how people are packaging and selling and writing those books. You look at how often they have to produce them, or how they're selling them. Is it through Amazon? Have they got their own stores? Are they doing it in a wide sort of platform? Are they Audible, TikTok, all of these things, right? Yeah. And by doing that, you can understand the path that works for you, as opposed to just being that frustrated person who's writing the books that you love and then wondering why other people don't resonate with them. And when you look at it from an outsider, it seems quite obvious, doesn't it? You're like, There are thousands of books. People aren't in need of books to read, right? We do this because we love it, because we want to. But we need to have the reader in mind as well during that process.
Oh, thank you. I love that answer. Yeah, that's great. So where can people find your books? You just talked about going wide versus exclusive. Where can people find your books, or find more about you as an author? So
LukeRichardsonAuthor.com is where you need to go for all of my books, my podcast, which is the Adventure Story podcast, and also information about my travels and my adventures and my inspirations is there as well. LukeRichardsonAuthor.com.
Awesome. I will link that on the show notes.
Fab. Thank you.
So I got a few questions for you. Spoiler alert for those who are listening. We are going to the spoiler section of the show, so you will want to pause
and
here.
Read the book.
Yeah, exactly. Pause, download, read. You'll be done no time, and then come back and listen to the last few minutes of the show. If you can remember, then now we're talking about how long ago you wrote
I was just
book.
thinking, yeah. You're going to ask me some really granular detail. What was he holding on the scene?
Was this the way it ends with, essentially the way it ends with the fight scene and the boat and the explosion and her in the water? Is that the way it originally ended, or was that ever changed at any point?
No, that's always been the end, and that to this story, yeah.
Okay, quick answer.
Do you mean? Yeah,
no, that was it. Yeah. No, I was always curious if that's because some people sometimes you write like a first draft of the version of the story, and then you just like, nah, that sucked. I'm gonna have to go change this because it just didn't strike with readers, or I hated the way I said this the first time. So you go and change it. You're like, nah, I don't want to be on a boat. We're gonna be on a helicopter or whatever. I don't know.
That is quite an unpopular scene, mind you, for reasons you can understand. Not because I don't think people like it, but because they're annoyed that Baxter has to drive into to save himself in order to sacrifice himself in favor of Eden. I know people have read it now, so I can say these things. But there are surprises to come, so don't lose faith.
Okay. You know why? Because it was like the beginning of a love story, and knowing that it's a series, and then at the end they're like, oh. for all the romance people out there, in a romance you can't leave it on like a bad ending, right? Like with romance, they say it has to be a happy ending somehow. So that you wrote the romance bad ending.
I wonder that about books like this. I think what I was keen to do, and as I say, there is more. I don't want to give a spoiler for the next book, but things aren't quite what they seem. I'll put that out there to you now. I think I wanted that romance trope. I like that. I love that in this sort of genre. I think that's really cool. But I think that shouldn't be, or I didn't want that to be the main trope. I wanted that to be a backseat thing. So I like the idea that it's there on the edge. It's peripheral, but it's not like they fall in love. But because the problem is, once that happens, it's sort of over, isn't it? There's nothing. There's not much more you can do with those two characters once that's happened. So I wanted that to to not be resolved during the book purposefully.
Yeah. How do you handle? This might be a spoiler too. Maybe you don't have to answer it for future books. But how do you handle a relationship in a series? Is it like Eve may be in a relationship and then she just like flies away and does these things and comes back to her boyfriend and wherever she's staying?
I've never dealt with that, but I know other authors who have, and they've had the characters get married and whatever through the series, and they do exactly as you described. Yeah, their lives change, and the sort of the relationships between the characters change and evolve, and that's just the way it is in life, I suppose, right? So there's nothing wrong with that. I haven't done that yet, but maybe one day I will. Although, as I say, I sort of feel like it. I sort of feel like it releases the tension slightly. I like the idea that hasn't happened.
I wonder how that impacts the reader, knowing that there's like someone back home. I mean, you think of like Alex Cross, but even Alex Cross with the James Patterson trilogy, like killed his wife at some point in the story, and then he suffered from all that tragedy, and then he's in and out of relationships. I wonder if James Patterson thought like, okay, this is, this relationship got dull or people got used to it. Now we have to throw this entire tragedy into the book and almost change the character, because now Alex Cross is this like almost brooding tough guy who's just really pissed off at the world kind of thing.
That's right. And I've seen this in books, and I sometimes think writers can lean a little bit too much into it. If it's, of course, a romance book, that's different. That's the genre. But when it's not specifically, and you dedicate all these pages to this particular element of their relationship, sometimes I find that it can be overdone slightly, I suppose, is what I mean.
Yeah. If you could change anything about this book or the way you wrote it, is there anything that you would want to change?
I'd say no now, but I'll sort of caveat that by saying if I open it now and start reading it, I will certainly I will certainly find things. I also know that the problem with a story is that it's really finely balanced. It's very, you change one thing and the whole rest of the thing falls out of sort of balance. You know, there's no such thing as a simple switch. Of course, like punctuation and grammar and stuff is different. What I'm talking about is plot and characterization and the story and whatever. So if you start tinkering under the hood, you're there for a long time. There's no sort of easy change with these things. So no. I would say no. At this point, it is what it is, and I'm pleased with that.
Okay, awesome. Well, this has been so much fun. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. This has been just a fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed the Ark Files. Look forward to reading the rest of this trilogy because I really enjoyed Eden, and I'd certainly like to read more about her.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's been great.
So if you don't mind sticking around for a few minutes, we have a quick after show with some rapid fire questions for our Patreon members. Thank you.